This is stepping in for The Billionaire Groom, Book 3 of the Benton Brothers series, by Kimberly Cray. Chapter 1. Kat's leg bounced restlessly as she sat in the waiting area for Xander Benton. She imagined that, if her heart could be seen as easily as her leg, it'd be doing a jig of its own. Mr. Benton's secretary had let him know Kat was there and assured her that he'd be with her momentarily. Good, except the idea of finally seeing the man face to face was scattering her thoughts like ashes in a windstorm. The line of framed photos on the wall didn't help. Headshots of each member of the Benton family, starting with Duke, Xander's twin, and ending with Winston Benton, the brother who died tragically from an overdose. The Bentons, with all of their billions, were wealthy in the looks department as well, and Xander, with his arresting gaze and intimidating poise, was no exception. Kat moved her focus down the line to rest on James, who'd recently married a personal chef from what she'd heard, and Betsy, the gorgeous redhead, had also recently married, just over the holidays in fact, to a childhood crush. She remembered being charmed by the tale as her friend Chelsea, a diehard Benton fan, gave her all the details. Kat wanted to believe that the Bentons were good people, and it seemed that most of them were, but Xander was the bad seed. She resisted the urge to pull out her phone and read over her bullet points. She'd gone over them enough. Beyond that, she'd emailed them to Xander personally before he'd agreed to rescue a company that he should have let die. The outdated printing press, Milton and Brewster, was polluting the area with its overstock of outdated, energy-hog equipment, not to mention the chemical waste those machines produced. Too bad he hadn't listened. Her phone gave out a menacing buzz from its spot in her purse, and then another. Why hadn't she shut it off? The last thing she needed was to be interrupted at a time like this. She sank a hand into her purse, blindly reached for the power button, and felt it vibrate and buzz once again. For crying out loud, better be important, she grumbled as she tugged the device from its hiding spot. A quick glance at the screen said it was, in fact, important. 3 texts had come in, one from each of the specialists from Married at First Meet, the social experiment reality TV show she'd tried out for. The same message blinked at her from each specialist. Congratulations, you're going into the final round of eliminations. It felt as if a round of applause was happening inside her ribcage. Wild clapping to the sudden pulse pounding within her head. Wow, she'd made it all the way to the end. Over the last few months, the elimination process had narrowed 30,000 contestants, leaving a mere 3 dozen remaining by New Year's. And now, only 1 week later, they were down to 24. Soon it'd be an even 12, 6 men and 6 women, all willing to step up to the altar and say I do to a person they'd never met before. The heart pounding kicked up a notch at the thought. Hopefully she'd be one of the finalists. Hopefully the guy they picked would be just the right one for her. He'd have to be. It was science, and science didn't lie. Heck, as a chemistry major, Kat relied on formulas. Sure, there was trial and error. But this method, the detailed questionnaires, deep personal inquiries, and exhaustive compatibility tests, were bound to give her the best chances at success. More importantly, this man would be ready for love and commitment. And there was no way she'd get lured into another ruse and fall for a man who wasn't who he said he was. The mere thought of her ex-boyfriend caused that dreaded sting to seep into her heart. No, Kat. He's in the past. Time to focus on your future. And if she was picked to move on to the final round, a wedding could be in her very near future. A swarm of butterflies fluttered in her tummy as she considered the magnitude of it all. She could actually meet her husband in a matter of weeks. She wished she could envision what he'd be like. Ms. Morgan? Mr. Benton will see you now. Kat lifted her gaze, tucked the phone back into her purse, and forced her mind back onto the reason she was there. Thank you, she said while coming to a stand. Time to give Mr. Xander Benton a piece of her mind.
Chapter 2. Xander stared at his twin brother's text as a blend of shock, nausea, and amusement clashed inside him. Duke, looks like I'm a finalist. If I make it past this round, I'll be saying I do before the month's through. Was he kidding? Betsy and Sawyer weren't even back from their honeymoon, And now suddenly there could be yet another wedding in the family? As much as Xander wanted to reply, something that would irk Duke and his prized man bun to the core, he needed to shift gears. Apparently, he had an environmental chemist on his back over one of the companies he'd agreed to rescue on the Lion's Den. The top-rated reality TV show run by Xander and his family allowed them, and guest billionaires like themselves, to rescue jeopardized multi-million-dollar companies while the cameras rolled. Not all were rescued, however. Many a CEO had shuffled off the set with heads hung low, scrambling for an investor of another sort. Anything to keep them from losing it all. Xander rapped a fist against the desk as he guessed at which company it might be. The NY restaurant chain he'd purchased came to mind. Perhaps they used non-recyclable takeout boxes, or maybe the line of Detroit factories he'd snatched up a few months back, although he doubted a chemist would fly clear to the other side of the country over such a thing. But then it hit him. Milton and Brewster, the printing press he'd rescued. An episode that aired just last night. The press was an environmental leper, especially in a city like LA, but Xander had his reasons for saving it. They were personal reasons, something the chemist wouldn't want to hear, but Xander wasn't about to let some geek in a lab coat tell him what to do with his money. Perhaps he should have asked Linda for a few details about this chemist before they met, gotten the guy's name at least. In Xander's experience, he was always more persuasive when he used a personable approach. Too late for that, he realized as he saw Linda striding down the hall with his visitor in tow. Wait, who was this? A gorgeous blonde in a fitted skirt, silky blouse, and a pair of heels. Perhaps he hadn't heard Linda correctly about his 10 o'clock. Through the glass walls surrounding his office, Xander watched the women approach the entrance. He stood to his feet as they stepped inside. Linda led the way, stopping just shy of his desk before turning to his pretty visitor. Ms. Morgan, this is Xander Benton. Mr. Benton, this is Kat Morgan, one of LA's environmental chemists. Beautiful and smart. There wasn't a better combination. Hello, Ms. Morgan, he said, offering his hand. She stretched a slender arm toward him and offered a firm, confident handshake. A hint of something tropical wafted through the air. Mr. Benton. Linda made her way toward the doorway with a nod. Thank you, Linda, he hollered, before setting his gaze back on. Kat, did she say? Yes, please. He waved to the leather chairs at the other side of his desk. Have a seat. Only she didn't. She simply glanced at the chairs before pinning her glare back on him. I'd rather not. She shifted her weight from one foot to the next. I want to know why you ignored my emails about Milton and Brewster. Crap. It was about the printing press. Xander tipped his head to one side. Emails? The woman let out a humorless laugh. Sir, I started sending you emails once I heard they planned to make an appearance on your family's TV show. I wrote you and your siblings and asked that you not rescue a company that pollutes our city and refuses to cooperate with sample collection on their premises. He stifled a groan. Xander had known he'd likely have a mess on his hands with the ancient company. He just hadn't had the chance to find out how messy the updating process would be. I assure you, he started as an errant thought hit his mind. Brown eyes. It was odd for blondes to have brown eyes, wasn't it? They were mesmerizing. Focus, Xander. He cleared his throat. Ms. Morgan, I can assure you that we have a qualified team sorting through emails about the Lion's Den, but you have to realize that there's a conflict of interest with several of the, he put up finger quotes, warnings we get where jeopardized companies are concerned. See, we can't be so sure that it's not someone else stepping in with ulterior motives, hoping to get the business in their own hands at a discounted price. He shrugged. We've got to take those with a grain of salt, or dismiss them entirely, which is what you did with my advice about that outdated detriment to our city. Thank you very much. The heat in her comment was evident in her cheeks, a warm shade of pink spreading over her face from ear to ear. I'm sorry that you feel. I mean, did someone think that I hoped to swoop in with a bag of cash and snatch it up after you rejected it? I didn't say that. I simply gave you an example of why those emails tend to go unanswered. Tend to go unanswered? That's rich. So this is more common than I thought. You guys ignore everyone and just do what you want. I know your father was friends with Mr. Brewster. You do? Why was he crumbling under this woman's scrutiny? He was Xander freaking Benton. And I don't think it's right to come in and rescue them from all the damage they've done to our environment just because he's a friend of a friend. A friend of my deceased father, you mean? Sheesh, the woman could at least have a little respect. And your visit, I regret to inform you, is premature. I won't be able to see what we need to change until we finalize the deal. Legalities take time. Her brown eyes widened suddenly, causing her expression to shift. She looked hopeful. So you haven't signed yet? Oh, crud. Well, so I'm not too late. Sir, Mr. Benton, he corrected. Mr. Benton, these guys have refused to cooperate with us for the last 3 years. They don't deserve to be. But Xander put up a hand. I'm sorry if I gave you the impression that you could stop the transaction, but the sale will be finalized whether you agree with it or not. He wouldn't be bullied out of rescuing the company, and that was final. But unlike Mr. Brewster and his partner, Xander had the funds to update their equipment and get them up to standards. Kat's face hardened. I knew it. Xander bristled at the comment. Listen, once the ink dries, I plan to. It's already too late, she snapped. I've been forced to take the proper course of action in getting the authorities involved. And while we're at it, I'm taking things a step further and ordering a complete evaluation of the press, the materials they've used, and the disposal of their waste over the last 3 years. She rested one hand on her hip and leaned, her narrowed eyes set on him. This woman was as infuriating as she was beautiful, and as brazen as her approach might be, he couldn't help but admire it. It wasn't often he worried over what people thought of him, but Xander didn't want her to see him as a monster. If you're so concerned about its effect on the environment, perhaps we could sit down together and discuss what needs to be done. She pulled back and blinked a few times in surprise, but then enlightenment seemed to flash in her eyes. And avoid that wrath they have coming to them? I don't think so. I plan to make a public example out of that company. Let people know exactly what happens when you ignore warning after warning, and plea after plea. Xander gritted his teeth and blew out a paced breath. Fine. Bring on the evaluation. We'll be ready. Oh, the evaluation is happening whether you're ready or not, she assured, and for a reason he couldn't explain, a hint of amusement crept in. I just said we would be ready, she shrugged. Good. Because it's happening, he hid a grin. Yes, you said that. Her lip quirked, and heaven help him, but Xander felt the response to that cute little quirk low in his belly. Stirrings of warmth and intrigue. He held her gaze as a spark of sorts danced between them, the anger shifting into something different. Did she feel it too? Probably not. Get her out of here, Xander. This woman has trouble written all over her. Thanks for coming to visit, Mrs. Morgan. Sure, he'd snuck the Mrs. in there, but only because he wanted to see if she'd correct him. Say that it was Miss instead. She didn't. In fact, her gaze only narrowed into a glare at his words. So, that's it? Was she kidding? Now it was his turn to release a humorless laugh. He motioned toward her. When one party refuses to hear out the other party, he said, motioning to himself next, there's nothing to be done. Don't you agree? Oh. Her expression softened. She took a step toward him, and Xander felt the heat of it low in his belly. You don't feel like you were heard? Her voice was sympathetic and soft. Her eyes widened, and her chin dropped in question. Of course he hadn't been heard. She'd interrupted him at every breath, but he didn't have to tell her that. Instead, Xander shook his head subtly. No, but if you're willing to try again. Well, now you know how I feel, she snapped. Before he could form a reply, the woman spun on one heel, clenched her purse strap over her shoulder, and marched out of the room. Xander forced out a slow breath through pursed lips as a fresh dose of fire flared hot in his chest. He was tempted to slam a hand on his desk and holler at her through the glass. What a crazy woman, he mumbled with the shake of his head. Yet as he watched her bolt down the hall in angry strides, her blonde locks bouncing with each and every step, a recollection came to mind. The hand she'd been clenching the bag with, her left hand, showed no evidence of a wedding ring on her finger. Xander knew he was nuts to pay attention to that detail in such a moment, but it wasn't every day a woman like that came along. Someone with such conviction. Misaimed as it was, he admired it. He reached for his phone and dialed up Linda on speaker. What can I do for you, Mr. Benton? Linda, when's my appointment with Milton and Brewster? Looks like it's scheduled for the 3rd of February, she said through the line. Huh. That was later than he thought. Perhaps if he could rush things along, he could meet up with Miss Cat Morgan himself and give her an update. See if you can move it up, will you? The sooner the better. Goodbye, Miss Morgan, Linda said faintly. Xander leaned toward the phone, wondering if he'd hear the woman's reply. Nothing. I'll reach out to them now and see what we can do, Linda said. Xander pictured the feisty chemist once more, the anger in her eyes, coupled with the heat of that moment when she held his gaze. "Thank you, Linda," he said. "And then, if you can, send Miss Morgan a dozen yellow roses." Linda was a professional. He learned that much over the years she'd worked for him. But even still, he felt the extended pause in her response. "What would you like the card to read?" "Thank you for your visit. I think you'll be pleased with the changes I plan to make with Milton and Brewster. If you change your mind about discussing the issue face-to-face, I'd be happy to meet with you." He paused there, an unfamiliar hint of desperation creeping in. He hadn't been this intrigued by a woman in years. "Attach my personal number," he added, "and sign my name." Sure, he might regret doing so, but Xander couldn't get himself to care. Even if it wasn't under the greatest terms, he wanted to see Kat Morgan again.
Chapter 3. Kat could barely believe the moment was real. In less than 60 seconds, she would tell her friends and family some very big news. All while a small camera crew from Married at First Meet filmed the shock and awe in their reactions. It felt like lava was bubbling in her stomach. Kat might have a strong enough conviction of her own, trusting the process with her future. But it didn't take a chemist to know her faith in the show, and its staff wouldn't be shared by her guests. And what a group it was. Her sister Jeannie sat on the couch beside her husband Craig, adjusting the collar of his polo shirt. They'd left Noah and Ben, their 2- and 4-year-old boys, with a sitter in preparation for the event. Mom and Dad stood behind the young couple, mumbling something or other and eyeing the camera crew suspiciously. For good reason. The only thing they'd been told about the gathering was that Kat had some very important, life-changing information to share with them. Her friends sat at the opposite end of the room, juggling party plates filled with hors d'oeuvres and half-empty wine glasses. Clearly, they were more at ease. They, unlike her family, knew what was coming. In fact, Piper and Charlotte had known about the show since Kat first auditioned. There was a reason she hadn't told her family until now. Her mom was a self-proclaimed hypersensitive worrywart, and her father, a half-Cherokee martial arts master, prided himself on detecting the intent of another man's heart. And perhaps he really could. Unlike Kat, Dad never fell for the charms of Bradley Stanger, the man who nearly ruined her faith in love. The mere thought triggered the lava flow once more, the heat quickly moving from her stomach to her face. Stan, the long-bearded cameraman running the scene, gave her a nod. "We're going to start rolling," he said. "You go ahead when you're ready." When she was ready. She'd likely never be ready. Kat caught herself glancing back at the tall vase in the corner. The yellow roses, though they'd only arrived 1 week earlier, were starting to wilt, but she hadn't been able to throw them away. It was dumb, and she knew it, but she'd received a small thrill from the gesture. Sure, Xander Benton had infuriated her beyond reason by rescuing a company that deserved to go down in flames. But there was no denying he was also one of the most handsome men she'd ever seen face to face. There was also no denying the draw of a powerful man. And there weren't many quite as impressive as the Benton men. In a way, she'd kept the flowers, as platonic as the gesture may have been, as homage to her last shred of singlehood. Something she'd soon say farewell to forever. Kat cleared her throat as something caught her attention. A flashing dot of red beside the lens. "Wait for me," came a voice from the hall. Ellis. She'd nearly forgotten he was there. Her longtime friend and co-worker had voiced a fair amount of concern over Kat's participation in the experiment, but at least he'd come to support her. She locked eyes on the lanky guy as he shuffled between her friends to take a seat beside Piper, declining the glass of wine she offered him. Kat reached for her ice water, took a long pull from the straw, and blew out a jagged breath. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I know this was kind of sudden, and that several of you don't have a clue what this is about." "Several," her father snapped. "You mean some of these guys already know what's going on?" He pointed across the room with a raised brow. "Dad." Kat said. Her father's jaw tightened. "We're listening." She couldn't stop her eyes from shooting to the lens aimed in her direction yet again. She'd been instructed not to look at it unless she was doing an interview with the producer, but it would take some getting used to. A cool sweat broke out over her brow. A few months ago, I volunteered to take part in a social experiment. One that would potentially find my perfect match. Kat hurried to take in the reaction on each face. Dad looked like someone was about to steal his lunch. Mom may as well have been watching a horror flick. Jeannie's eyes went as wide and worried as Mom's, a trait she didn't inherit until she had kids of her own. Her husband, Craig, wore an amused smirk on his face. Kat shifted her gaze to the other side of the room, purposefully moving past Ellis. She always sensed he had a crush on her, and settling on Charlotte and Piper. Finally, a set of smiles as broad as the confidence Kat had in the program. She kept her gaze there to make her final announcement. I made it past several rounds, and I was recently notified that the show has done it. They found my perfect match. And we're going to get married in 2 weeks. Charlotte and Piper shot to their feet and broke into squeals. Kat braced herself as they rushed in with extended arms, balancing their drinks and food as they congratulated her in turn. "I knew you were going to get picked," Piper said with a kiss to her cheek. Charlotte trapped the two in a hug as she came in next. "I can't wait to meet him." Elation shot through her as she grabbed Charlotte's elbows and squeezed. "Neither can I." Hold up, Dad boomed. "What do you mean by neither can I? Do you mean to tell me you're about to marry some guy you've never met?" The other camera operator circled around Dad as his face went from bronze to red. "Does this punk know that your father is a martial arts master? It doesn't have to be permanent, Dad." She went on to elaborate, but Mom spoke over her. "Marriages are meant to last, Katrina Aponi." "I know that," Kat said. "But as part of the experiment, we meet back up in 8 weeks and decide whether or not we're going to stay married or get it annulled." "Kat," her father said sternly. He could be some maniac. A thick wave of dread rushed in as she scrambled for a response. She had one planned, memorized even, only now she couldn't remember a word of it. Suddenly, Ellis shot to his feet. "The show knows who he is. All the contestants had to go through an extensive process with background checks and everything." He propped his glasses with his index finger and gave him a curt nod. "Just so you know." "Is that who called us?" Mom asked. "The woman said she was checking references for your job with the county, not a wedding show." "Yeah," Kat said. "That was them." "Well, that makes me feel better," Dad said. It was the first real sprig of regret she'd felt since getting chosen. This was bound to be the most embarrassing family session of the entire experiment. The very idea sparked a hot flame of anger. She wasn't a child anymore, and she didn't appreciate being treated like one. Kat had been very careful during the process, and she wasn't about to let anyone make her regret it before she even met the groom. Forget the fact that she'd face a monster-sized lawsuit if she tried turning back now. The fact was, Kat wasn't interested in turning back. She lifted her shoulders, firmed her stance, and lifted her chin. "I'll give you all the details," she assured. "I will, but I wanted to start with the most important one. And that is, that whether you guys agree with it or not, I'm getting married in 2 weeks' time. And I hope you'll all be there."
Chapter 4. Xander stared at the phone on his desktop, a hot dose of dread slipping slowly over his skin. Perry, Duke's irresponsible public relations rep, had sent Xander 2 texts earlier that day, 5 minutes apart no less. Text 1, "Call me as soon as you get this." Text 2, "Your brother's gotten himself into a sticky spot. Please call immediately." Xander didn't call Perry. He did, however, call Duke. It was no surprise that he didn't answer, but that didn't stop the onslaught of worst-case scenarios from flooding his mind. Heck, within the last 7 years, the Bentons had lost a brother, their father, and their grandfather too. Only, Xander was certain Duke's sticky spot, as Perry put it, was far from fatal. The truth was, Xander had an inkling as to what the trouble might be, which was probably where the dread came from. His office phone let out a beep. "Mr. Benton?" Linda said through the line. "Perry did say it was urgent. You'll be picking up soon, right?" Xander groaned. "Right." With that, he reached across the desk and tapped a finger on the flashing dot. "This is Xander." "Oh, man. Thank you for taking my call, man. You have no idea what Duke's gotten himself into. I think I do, Xander interrupted. He stood to his feet in the quiet pause, tucked a hand into one pocket, and circled the desk. Does it have something to do with a social experiment? A chorus of crickets would have been more comforting than the silence that followed Xander's question. Let me guess. He got picked, and now he has to marry some woman he's never met. Am I right? He told you about it. Xander stopped pacing, clenched his eyes shut tight, and stifled a curse. Hello? He said nobody knew about it. He shuffled back to his desk and sank into the chair, giving in to the heightened pull of gravity, a force that threatened to plunge him into dark places. We knew about the show, the fact he tried out for it a long time ago. He sounded shocked every time he made it to the next round. Xander's words died off as he considered the last time Duke texted him regarding the show. It was moments before the pretty chemist walked through his door. He sighed, forcing his mind back to the issue. Last I heard, he had one final round of eliminations to go through. So they picked him? They picked him. They notified him. And I think he's in denial or something. Probably, Xander said. Who wouldn't be? It was a crazy thing to sign up for. The magnitude of the situation hovered beyond a mound of thinning denial. Having money did that to a person, made them feel as if they could get out of anything. But that wasn't always the case. And as much as he'd teased his twin for signing up for the TV show, Xander knew how binding those contracts could be. He pictured Grandma Lowe and her determination to hold up the Benton name after Dad and Grandpa died. The last thing the Benton family needed was a fresh scandal on their hands. And hadn't they had enough media attention over the last few years? Duke signing up for the reality wedding TV show, whatever it was, would bring on a whole lot more. At once Xander's shoulders lifted. Duke might have beat him out of the womb, but Xander had played the part of the oldest for as long as he could remember, and it was his job to fix this. I'll talk to him, he said. In fact, I'll head over after my 3 o'clock and... He's in Nepal. Xander shot to his feet. What? The single word rumbled the glass walls surrounding his office, but that was nothing compared to the trembling within him. On the family's TV show, Xander was often introduced as the lion with the loudest roar. The truth was, he'd only lashed out twice during production, and both incidents were within the first year of filming, a time Xander was trying to cope with his father's death. And though he'd learned to control his temper since then, the perfect storm, passion, frustration, and outright fury, gave life to that roar even still. Perry squeaked through the line. He went to Mount Everest. Linda came rushing down the hall in long, desperate strides, her gaze catching his through the glass. Xander put up a hand as she scurried into the room, concern etched on her pale face. Just when is this wedding supposed to take place? That's the reason I'm calling you. Xander gritted his teeth. When? In 2 days. 2 days? Claudia Benton cried. There has to be some sort of mistake. Xander tore his gaze off the Persian rug at his feet to look at his mother. It's not a mistake. He glanced about the large room, catching one horrified expression after the next. It had taken exactly 3.5 hours to assemble an emergency family meeting at his place. Everyone had made it. Everyone, that is, except for Duke. I can't believe he'd do something like that. Mom's boyfriend, Michael, said. I can, snapped Grandma Lowe. He might pretend to be a playboy, but I think Duke's a romantic at heart. I've always suspected that about him. Xander fought back an eye roll and turned his gaze to the newlywed section. His sister Betsy and her husband Sawyer were seated on the leather sofa beside James and his wife Camilla. Without the other single sibling in the family, Xander was highly outnumbered. But of course, if Duke stayed true to the contract he'd signed, he wouldn't be single for long either. Mom must have been thinking a similar thing because suddenly she gasped and brought a hand to her chest. That will make 3 Benton weddings in a year's time. I'm going to kill him, Xander hissed as he folded his arms. You can't kill him, Mom said, her voice tight. Who knows if he'll even survive Everest? People die there all the time. Xander was too angry to worry over his brother's safety. He's just dodging his responsibilities. Who knows if he's even attempting to climb it? He looked over at James for backup. Yeah, his younger brother said. I agree. He's probably not climbing it. That's not something people decide to do last minute. They have to train for something like that. Xander huffed out a breath. Let me just break this down for everybody since I don't think we're grasping the magnitude. He held up a finger. There's a camera crew lined up and ready to film a wedding that's supposed to happen in 2 days. Xander held up a second finger. There's a woman, Lord only knows what she's like, who's known for nearly 2 weeks that the wedding was on. She has a dress by now, bridesmaids, you name it. What she doesn't have. He paused there, his gaze settling on Betsy in time to catch the fresh bout of horror on her face. Is a groom, she finished for him, voice flatter than a deflated balloon. Her blue eyes went wide and worried. She stood to her feet suddenly. We can't let that happen. We've got to call the show and move the production date. But Xander only shook his head. They're filming live. That one earned a full chorus of gasps. Live! Grandma had lost her low and steady tenor. The single word had come out as more of a squeak. Betsy's shoulders dropped. Great, Xander nodded. Yep. The silence hovering over the air was thick with all the unspoken sentiments playing through Xander's mind. The cost of a live production, the intense planning and costly promoting for such an event. They were in the business after all. The repercussions of messing with a live production could make Mount Everest look like the kiddie hill at a theme park. He has to be able to get out of it somehow, Camilla said, looking to James. James squared a look at Xander. You said Perry sent you the contract. Did you already have Miles go over it? It felt like bumper cars were crashing against Xander's skull as he recalled the family's lawyer spelling out the ironclad details. Yep, and? James urged. Brutal. As long as Duke's living, he's liable. Chatter picked up among them once more. Mom mumbling to Michael, the newlyweds whispering under their breath like a secret society of their own. Grandma groaned and thrust her fingers against her forehead. We can't afford another scandal. I agree, Mom said, eyes narrowing in concentration. But I might have a solution. The mumbling died down. All eyes shifted to Mom in the quiet pause. A pause that made Xander's insides squirm. What is it? He regretted the question the moment it slipped off his tongue. Had he not encouraged it, Mom might have kept the thought to herself, and Xander had a feeling that her idea, whatever it was, would be risky. Now hear me out, she prefaced while lifting a hand. We can't get hold of Duke, but we know he knows about the wedding, and he made sure Perry knew about it too. Either he's heading back now, in which case he'll be home in time for the big day, or he's hiding out until he misses it. Either way, we've got to be ready. Xander shrugged. Ready for what? If he doesn't show, there is no wedding. Mom tipped her head to one side. That's not necessarily true. I mean, yes, there has to be a groom, and if one doesn't show, the repercussions will be ugly for our family. Unfathomably so. But a gasp sounded from the newlywed section. Xander looked over in time to see Betsy lean over Sawyer and whisper something to Camilla, who let out a gasp of her own. Mom grinned. Looks like the ladies are catching on. Irritated heat prodded at Xander's insides. Catching on to what? Think about it, Xander. You and Duke are identical. So, but then it hit him. The slam of a mallet to a dangling, unsuspecting gong. Enlightenment was a funny thing. The word itself suggested that light had been shed on a certain thought or idea, making what was once unseen visible to the mind. But what if that thing, the very thought or idea, contained no light at all? No, just think about it, his mom urged. You probably won't even have to go through with it. Chances are Duke's on his private jet as we speak, heading home in time to do it himself. If that's the case, we still need to be ready for this wedding. That's true, Betsy said. You'll have to wear a tux, either way. James was next to speak up. So, you're saying that Xander should make plans to be there like the rest of us. In a tux, Mom inserted. And then if Duke doesn't show, you want Xander to step in and say, I do, in his place? James shot Xander an apologetic look. I'm sorry, but that's nuts. Thank you for seeing reason, James, Grandma Lowe said. There's no way I'd allow my grandson to do such a thing. Relief rushed through Xander's tightened form. Good, because I'd never agree to it anyway. Do you want to save this family from further scrutiny or not? Mom asked. Grandma Lowe was on her feet in a blink, hand raised high and chin propped even higher. We are not going to make fools of ourselves for Duke's sake. If he doesn't show, he'll simply have to suffer the consequences. She nodded, eyes thoughtful as she lifted a finger. But perhaps we can get hold of him after all. See to it that he keeps his word if he's not already on his way. Michael said, "and we can't even get hold of him. There's no way we'll get him here in 2 days." Grandma Lo chuckled in response. It sounded like the intro to a good retort, but since Grandma couldn't possibly have one, Xander assumed she was suffering a moment of madness instead. "You're new to this family, so let me share a little something with you, Michael. When you have money like we do, there's always a way." She turned her piercing gaze to Xander. "We are going to get hold of Duke, and we'll make sure he keeps his end of this deal." The stubborn woman headed toward the door, snatched her handbag off the side table, and turned to look over her shoulder. "Well, what are you waiting for? Get moving. I expect every one of you to do whatever you can to get Duke home. We'll have a conference call at 8 p.m. to discuss our findings." With that, she walked out the door, leaving it wide open behind her.
Chapter 5. Kat smiled as she took in her reflection before the full-length mirror. With the help of the finest wedding boutique in town, Kat had secured her dream dress in the short time frame. A selection of satin, silk, and chiffon created elegant layers along the gown. The bodice was a sight in itself. Handmade lace lay over the tulle fabric, accenting one of the gown's best features, a beautiful heart-shaped neckline. "You look truly stunning," her mom said, coming up behind her. "I know your dad's given you a hard time about this whole thing, but I have a good feeling about it. I really do." If anything could make Kat's eyes double in size, it was a comment like that from her mom, of all people. "You do?" Only then did she notice the absence of her mother's obsessive mannerisms. The pacing, fidgeting, and mumbling. Instead, Mom had been still. Kat met her gaze to see tears brimming in her hazel eyes. "Yes." The single word was coated with a laugh. She grabbed her hands and gave them a squeeze. "It doesn't make any sense. Normally I'd be a complete wreck at a time like this. But..." She shrugged and sniffed. "You're a smart woman, Katrina. Perhaps this really is how you're going to find Mr. Right." A band of warmth encircled Kat's heart, infusing her with comfort, peace, and much-needed assurance. "I really hope so. I haven't wanted to put myself out there since..." Kat shook her head, not willing to utter her ex-boyfriend's name on such a day. "Anyway, I have a good feeling about it too." And she did, for the most part. "Is it crazy that I'm more nervous about being on live TV than I am about taking the vows?" Her mom chuckled. "They're both pretty intense, hun." A small metal clank sounded a second before the door burst open. Jeannie hurried into the bride's room and closed the door behind her. Kat couldn't escape the worried look on her face. A hand went to one cheek. "Kat," she said in a whisper, "you look... wow." She dabbed at the corners of her eyes, a perfect match to Mom's. Before Jeannie had stepped into parenthood, the saddest flick failed to tug at her heartstrings. Boy, had that changed. "Thanks," Kat said. Her sister rushed in, tossing her arms around her. "I can't believe you're getting married today." "I can't either," Kat admitted. "It doesn't seem real." The comment must have reminded Jeannie of something, because suddenly the worried expression was back. "What's wrong?" Kat asked. Jeannie shook her head. "I'm sure it's nothing, but..." "The groom's family isn't there yet." Kat's mom shot a look at the time. "It starts in like 15 minutes. Jeannie nodded. "Yeah, I know." Weird. A knock sounded at the door. "Ladies?" Kat recognized Marsha Langston's voice with ease. The savvy producer specialized in reality TV shows such as Find My Fiancé, Love or Lust, and Dating Mr. Maybe. It was said that, despite her rather brazen approach, the woman was secretly a romantic at heart. "Come on in," Kat hollered. Marsha stepped inside and scrutinized the small cluster while smoothing a hand over her ebony shoulder-length hair. "The countdown is on, and we'd like to get a bit of live footage before they go to break." Mom nodded and pulled Kat in for a final hug. "See you in there, hun." Jeannie pressed a kiss to her cheek before stepping back with a wave. "Good luck." A fresh knot of nerves twisted and turned in Kat's tummy. At that very moment, the host of Married at First Meet, Lisa Throw, was in front of a live studio audience, preparing the guests for the action. Once the door closed behind them, Marsha squared a look at her with a set of fierce green eyes. Kat squirmed beneath the intense gaze, wondering if she was about to deliver a piece of bad news. At once, the intensity behind her gaze softened, and the woman gave into a nod, and then a slight, knowing grin. "I think this is going to be a good match," she said. Kat gulped. "I hope so." "Well, your father's waiting for you just outside. You should know that he threatened to hurt your groom if he ever hurt you." Kat gasped. "He already met him?" Marcia shook her head. "No. He told me he'd, let me see if I've got the words right, rearrange his face if he broke your heart." A laugh spilled from Kat's lips. "That sounds like him." "I'm sorry." But Marcia only shook her head. "No need to apologize. He's a caring father. He doesn't want you to get hurt again. America will relate to him." A small tap came from the door. "You in there, Kit Kat?" "His ears must have been burning," Marcia said. "Come on in, Mr. Morgan." The door creaked open, and there stood her dad, tall and proud in his tux, complete with the added touch of Granddad's bolo tie, a silver steer skull on black, braided leather. "I'll let you two have a minute alone. When you hear my knock at the door, please step out, arm in arm, and get into position at the designated spot. The cameras will capture a bit of the pre-game footage before we go to break. When we come back, you'll be seconds away from walking down the aisle." Another rush pushed through her at the words. "A quick recap," Marcia said as she headed to the door. She spun around and held out a finger. "Once the song changes, you start walking. Slowly, try not to look at the cameras. When the music stops, silently count to 5 before facing your groom. The pastor will take it from there. Got it?" Kat nodded. "Got it." Marcia looked at her watch. "You've got 2 minutes before I knock." And with that, she stepped out and closed the door. "I heard you're making threats out there," Kat said. He chuckled, his brown eyes meeting hers. "Yeah, well, you can't blame me. You're my baby girl." He took a step back and blew out a whistle. "I just can't figure out how you grew up so quick." He sniffed, stepped in closer, and pulled Kat into one of his bear hugs. "Katrina a pony," he said under his breath. "My little butterfly is ready to fly away." Kat patted his broad shoulders and wiped at her eyes. "You're going to make me cry." Her dad pulled back, tugged a handkerchief from his pocket, and offered it to her. He stayed silent as Kat dabbed her eyes and checked her reflection. No makeup smudges, no redness in her eyes either. Her cheeks were flushed, her neck too, but there was no avoiding that. A tap came to the door. "Time for the father of the bride to bring out his girl," Marcia said. Kat and her father hurried over to the door. She looped a hand through his arm, reached for the bouquet beside the door, and blew out a breath. "Hey," her dad said while reaching for the doorknob. "I hope you know that I really want this to work, Kit Kat. I do. I want this guy to measure up to every standard you have." She grinned. "Thanks, Dad. And if he doesn't, then..." He tipped his head to one side. "Then I'll rearrange his face a little." He twisted the knob the slightest bit and turned to her. "Ready?" Kat licked her lips, steadied her breath, and curbed the grin that came to her lips. She was about to meet and marry, hopefully, the man of her dreams. "Yes, I'm ready."
Chapter 6. 6 family members, 4 walls, and a mound of resentment larger than Everest. As massive as the chapel might be, there wasn't room enough for the chaos crashing over Xander. "I thought you said he was close," he groaned against his palms. Grandma had told him yesterday that Duke was on his way back, that he'd be there with time to spare, and now, just minutes before the live ceremony, he finds out that's not the case. "There was a storm, Xander," James said. "Last time I checked, money can't control the weather." Xander tore his face from his hands and shot James a look. "Why are you defending him?" "He's not defending him," Mom said. "He's stating the facts. The storm got bad. The pilot had to take a different route and land in D.C., and they've been grounded since then. All of the flights are, Xander. There's nothing anyone can do." Xander moved his gaze across the room. Camila, James's wife, dropped her gaze. Betsy dodged it too, suddenly taking interest in Sawyer's tie. Xander locked eyes with Sawyer in time to see him gulp and shift. "You know how live TV works," James said. "We all do." The show is airing footage leading up to this even as we speak, with a live host who reminds viewers, before each commercial, that the countdown is on. There is no getting out of this without catastrophic backlash. Dude, he said. Did everyone know that he wasn't going to make it but me? Xander shot to his feet and waved toward the tux hanging on the armoire. Was this all for show? Get Xander here, make him think Duke would make it in time, and when he doesn't, beg him to step in and take his place. Grandma approached him with a wave of her hands. Shh, she pleaded. We can't let anyone catch wind of this. Just listen. His chest contracted like a tightening fist. I can't believe you're in on this. I can't believe it either. But the fact that I am should tell you something. Her blue eyes locked on his as she took hold of his elbow. Duke is willing to step up and take responsibility for this. He is, and he plans to do it as soon as he gets here. All we need is for you to stand at the altar, say I do in his place, and get us through this live production that half of America is waiting for. Exactly, his mom said, coming up alongside him. All you have to do is get through the wedding. But what if he can't get here before tonight? Xander asked. Then I'm sure he'd be here first thing in the morning. Xander's eyes widened. First thing in the morning? You'd expect me to pull this off through their wedding night? You do know what that means, right? Did any of you think about that? I'm surrounded by crazy people right now. Betsy rushed in. I doubt couples from this experiment are consummating the marriage on the first night. I agree, Camila added, coming up behind Betsy. They don't even know each other yet. Under conditions like these, that expectation is probably out the window. For the females, anyway, James mumbled. Sawyer chuckled under his breath. Right. A knock sounded at the door. We go live in exactly 11 minutes and 32 seconds, came a female voice. Our bride is on the other side waiting to walk. We need our groom at the altar and his family in the pews, please. Grandma Lowe ran over to the closed door and hollered a reply. Thanks, Marcia. We'll be right out. Who's Marcia? Michael asked. Marcia Langston? Grandma said. The producer. Xander thought back over the last few years as a new spark of frustration tore at his mind. I thought Duke was really getting his crap together. He was... A flashback of Winston's funeral came to mind. He changed after Winston died. He grew up. Or so I thought. You're right, James agreed. Which is why I think he signed up for this thing. And of all the people who tried out, of all the men out there who just want to find the person who's right for them, they pick Duke. I have to think there's a reason for that. Xander caught nods of agreement from across the room. All the way down to Michael, who was the only one still seated. This was a new sort of desperation. For the first time since the issue arose, Xander realized a second motive behind the family's desire to make the wedding happen. One that wasn't protecting the Benton name, rather preserving Duke's shot at love. But did they want that more than Duke did? Would Duke really follow through if Xander stepped in for him? He turned to Grandma Lowe. Can you get him on the phone for me? A video chat. We're running out of time, she hissed. But she pulled out her phone just the same. I won't do it until I know Duke's committed. How will you know? Michael challenged. Xander knew exactly how. You'll see. Grandma put her phone on speaker as it started to ring. 2 seconds later, Duke picked up. Did he say yes? Is he going to do it? Grandma passed the phone. I'll let him answer that. Xander was pleased to see that Duke really was cooped up in his private jet, waiting for the weather to clear. Hi there, brother. How was Nepal? Duke's lips tightened. Come on, Xander. I'm watching the live footage from the jet. You're supposed to be walking down that aisle in less than 10 minutes. No, Xander said, forcing his voice to stay low. You are supposed to walk down that aisle in less than 10. Duke sighed. Look, I'm sorry, man, okay? At least I left the ring there. Xander shook his head. The detail took him back. He hadn't even thought about the ring. You did what? I've got it right here, Mom said. She tossed the box to James, who caught it in one hand. Listen, Duke continued. I was an idiot to leave. Will you please just help me out tonight? I promise to take over the second I get back. I'm thinking about it. Groans sounded from behind, but Mom's was the loudest. You're going to give your poor mother a heart attack, Michael said from his spot on the lounge chair. Xander squared a look at his twin through the screen. You know what you'll have to give up, right? Duke shrugged. Of course. Bachelorhood, freedom, dating random chicks whenever I would. Your hair, Xander said. Duke's face fell flat. A curse slipped through his lips. Xander grinned. The man bun has to go or this won't work. You're right. An audible gulp slunk past Duke's throat. I know that. He reached up a hand and gave the man bun a longing pat, as if testing to see that it was still there. His face hardened. No problem, I'll do it as soon as I land. Send me the number to your barber, will you? I will, Xander assured. But first, I need you to show me that you mean it. Duke's face scrunched up. I do mean it, but Xander only shook his head. That's not what I meant. Show me that you're serious by cutting it off now. Sure, it might seem extreme, but Xander had seen Duke change his mind 1,000,000 times over. He wasn't about to step up and take his brother's place without an equal commitment on his end. And his hair, that cherished man bun, was everything to him. Duke's jaw tightened as he shook his head. Fine. Xander watched as he waved over the attendant on his grounded jet. A very beautiful attendant at that. Duke better be serious about kissing his flirtatious ways goodbye. The woman nodded as he mumbled to her, and then stepped beyond the camera phone's view. She was back in seconds flat, a small pair of scissors in her grip. I need you to cut my hair, Duke mumbled to her. If you don't mind, cut it? She asked, looking from Duke to the phone. Xander nodded. It has to look like mine eventually, so you can't take off too much. But go ahead and pull it out of that little bun thing until it's hanging down like a ponytail. Duke shot him a seething glare as the attendant did just that. We're down to 8 minutes now, Mom warned. Xander kept his eyes locked on the screen. Okay, he said to the attendant. Slip the scissors around the length of his hair, then slide down just an inch or two. Yeah, like that. Now give it a good hard snip. Duke clenched his eyes as she did the deed, squeezing the small scissors several times to cut all the way through it while pinning the tip of his hair between her finger and thumb. Once she was done, she handed the 2-inch chunk of hair to Duke. Here you are. Xander covered a grin as his brother inspected the piece like it was a missing appendage. There, he finally spat. Are you satisfied? Was that a tear in his eye? Xander puffed up his chest as he sucked in a breath. Yes. Another knock came to the door. 7 minutes until we're live, whether you're seated or not. Remember the contract you signed, Mr. Benton. Be right there, Xander hollered over his shoulder. He straightened the sleeves of his tux, smoothed a hand down the front, and whispered a few barely audible words just for him. Wish me luck, brother. He shot him a wink. I'm about to go make out with your future wife.